So in this video I would like to share with you three albums that I bought fairly early on when I was relatively young, but which had such a profound effect on me that I actually still listen to them, or bits of them, today. Now, it's difficult, I think, to say where my influences came from, but they probably influenced me in some ways. So I would like to share these albums with you and explain why I found them so exciting at the time. Now, there is not going to be any music in this video because you never know where the copyright police are lurking, but I will leave links to the albums on YouTube in the description, and you can probably find them on your favourite streaming service anyway. Now, as well as these three albums, which I'll get to in a minute, I'd like to make some honourable mentions. Out of the hundreds of albums I have bought and listened to, it was very difficult picking just three, even though I am concentrating on early albums. So we'll start with the honourable mentions, and the first one has absolutely got to be Mike Oldfield's Tubular Bells, which came out in 1973. Now, although it's not one of my three albums, I do still listen to this on occasion. To me, at the time, this album was absolutely genre-breaking, or perhaps genre-defining. It didn't follow the normal song structure. It didn't follow any classical music structure either. And it was full of wonderful tunes, as well as this very interesting and exciting introductory riff. There were lots of interesting riffs and snippets and tunes throughout the piece. The next honourable mention goes to Jim Steinman's and Meatloaf's Batt Out of Hell, which was released in 1977. Dozens of amazing albums were released in the 70s. One of the things I liked about this was the fact that Steinman has taken typical pop and rock song structure, thrown it out the window and put it together in his own fashion. He showed you do not have to follow a set of preordained song structure rules to create absolutely fantastic music. Yes, it was a bit rocky. I still like rock now. I don't think you ever grow out of it. But as well as being rocky, it had a really good tunes as well. Another one from the 70s was Jean-Michel Jarre's Oxygene, which came out in 1976, and this was among one of the earliest electronic music albums that I bought. Final honourable mention before we get onto the big three is John Barry's music for the Ipcress file. Now, this came out way back in 1965. Now, we didn't have streaming, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have computers. I went to the cinema to watch this, and I was blown away by the main title theme. I think it encapsulated perfectly the down-to-earth, or perhaps down-at-heel spy from Len Deighton's novel. John Barry, I think, did an amazing job. And to me, this is one of the seminal pieces of movie theme music. It could well be responsible for my interest in media music composition and movie music in particular. Okay, let's get on to the main three. So the first one is an album you may not have heard of. It is called Supernatural Fairytales by a group called Art. It was released in 1967. I didn't actually buy this until the 70s, and it was recommended to me by a friend who was into heavy metal. Now, Supernatural Fairytales was the only album released by Art. They had a couple of previous names, I believe, and after they produced this album, the group, I think, disbanded and then reformed as Spooky Tooth, who you may have heard of, even if you haven't heard of Art. So my friend was well into his heavy metal music. Now, this is not, I don't think, in any way, shape or form, a heavy metal album. I think you can see by looking at the cover, it was psychedelic rock. And again, it had some fantastic tunes, and it was a really rocky album. Now, this was during my formative years. I was into pop music, I was into rock music. This was a rocky album, psychedelic rock though it may have been, but it had fantastic tunes. I think they were mainly co-written by the band themselves. As a kid, I played this album over and over again, and through the intervening years, I still occasionally went back to it to listen to some of the tracks. So the next album is another one from 1977, and it is Schizophonia by Mike Batt. Now, you've probably heard of Mike Batt. I believe this was his first album. And if anyone back in the 70s knew Mike Batt, it was because he wrote the music for the Wombles. Now, you may have to be of a certain age to know what the Wombles were. They were creatures who lived on Wimbledon Common. It was a kids' TV programme. And I think a lot of people at the time looked down on the music for the Wombles as throwaway kiddie music, but if you listen to some of the tunes, they actually were very, very cleverly constructed. Mike Batt was a brilliant composer. Listen to them outside the confines of the TV series, I think you will realise how well they were written. Mike also wrote the music Bright Eyes for the movie Watership Down, which you may be familiar with, even if you are not familiar with the Wombles. Now, back in the day, the only way to hear about new pieces of music was to listen to the radio, and I heard an interview with Mike Batt on the radio, and they played extracts from his Schizophonia record. And what grabbed me, and it really did grab me, were several pieces of music on this album which had an Arabian or Moroccan influence, particularly Raito Agadir. Several other pieces were in a similar vein. Now, I assume he called it Schizophonia because although several pieces had this Arabian influence, there were also several pop songs mixed up in the album. Now, at the time, I wasn't so impressed by the pop songs, but they included songs which have since been recorded by many other artists, such as Railway Hotel and Walls of the World. So again, these were superb compositions, and the rhythm and the tunes of these Arabian pieces absolutely blew me away. So I remember listening to the interview and rushing out after it to buy it in the shop. And I still play some of these pieces today. So Schizophonia, it wasn't just rock and pop, there was a lot of orchestration in these as well, and I think this combination of rock and pop and orchestra really struck a chord, so to speak, with me. And soon after this, I think a couple of years later, he released another album called The Tarot Suite, which was quite heavily orchestrated, rocky, poppy orchestration, a concept album, if you like. And that was another one of my favourites. I didn't like it quite as much as the Arabian influenced Schizophonia, but it is still a really nice album. And the third album in my list, I think will probably come as no surprise. It is an album by Vangelis, and it is Spiral, and this was released in 1977 as well. A very expensive year for me buying albums. This was another album which was recommended to me by a friend, and we were both into rock and electronic music, such as it was at the time. And what really struck me about this was, again, its wonderful use of tune, but the title track Spiral, it consists of these notes which spiraled around, and I thought, how does he do that? And I was trying to work out what sort of sounds and what sort of notes he was playing to get this spiraling effect. I just thought this was wonderful, and this was another album which absolutely blew my mind, and I played it over and over. I still listen to it. There's certainly the title track and a couple of the other tracks through the years. So I did what I think a lot of people did at the time, and I think people probably still do now. If you find an artist whose music you like, you explore other albums and other pieces of music by that artist. So after I had listened to Spiral a few times, I went out and bought Albedo and Heaven and Hell, which I think was his first album, and followed him ever since. So that is 3 albums, well actually more than 3 albums, but they are 3 albums I have continued to listen to over the years, so they obviously made an impact on me and quite possibly are responsible for some of the influences which may appear in my music. So if you have listened to some of the pieces of music on this channel, then I guess Vangelis is probably the closest you may have associated with some of the music which I've produced. So let me ask you, do you have any albums which you bought early on in your record buying career which you still listen to today? If you do, let me know, because it's always interesting to share music and to find out what people enjoy about it. I hope you have enjoyed this little share, and if you haven't heard of any of these albums, then I do hope you will go and check them out and let me know what you think of them in the comments. So if you have enjoyed this video, perhaps you would like to consider subscribing to the channel, ringing the bell. Thank you. So you get informed of new videos as soon as I release them. Some of them actually do have music in them. And if you would like to click the big thumb, provided you've enjoyed the video, of course, then that would be a big help as well. So as always, I do appreciate you spending your time with me watching my videos. So for that, thank you very much indeed. I will see you again very soon in the next one.